first off, I like to say welcome. I'm the community coordinator here at Burlington Code Academy, and I'm here with Maddy Gale, who is our marketing coordinator. We also have our panel members, and we're really happy to be continuing our BCA Talks Tech series. So this is our second ever webinar event, and the goal of the series is really to amplify and celebrate the voices that the tech industry is composed of and bring attention to all of the different avenues in which tech affects our daily lives. So today we're going to be talking about how social media can be used as a tool for change, and our panel is made up of Bethelehem from Diversify Our Narrative, Sophia from Olive and Milo Social, and Riana from Boss Women Collective. So we've got people who are doing amazing work in this sphere, and yeah, I'm super excited to hear from everyone. Woo! So first off, I'm just going to go sort of how everyone is in my screen. So Sophia, if you want to give your introduction, a little bit about yourself, then Bethelehem, if you would like to, and then Riana, if you would like to. That sounds good.
Sure. Thanks, Sadie and Maddy. So I'm Sophia. I am in the Burlington area of Vermont. I've been doing marketing for about 7 years now, since I graduated college, and about 3.5 years ago, I started my own thing coming out of doing marketing elsewhere. I really wanted to focus on social media because I think it's really, I think when it's used properly, it can be really fascinating. And I really like how it's both creative and storytelling, but it's also driven by numbers and data. So it's kind of like a mix of my two favorite things. So I help a variety of clients across the country, a lot of nonprofits, but then also just a lot of like retail and restaurant and independent entrepreneurs and artists tell their story and just kind of hone in on how they want to be present online and what that looks like, both from a strategic point of view as well as a visual point of view. And yeah, it's been really interesting this year as, it's become a tool for change and how different clients want to use it and just like how that's had to pivot. But I'm just excited to kind of continue the conversation because I think it's really important.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Bethelehem. I am a sophomore at Stanford University studying management science and engineering with a minor in data science. And I chose this because I'm super interested in the intersection between business and technology, especially when it comes to social good. And so I've been able to bring those skills to Diversify Our Narrative, and I am basically the director of finance there when we started in June of 2020. And to kind of explain what we do, we're a grassroots, completely student-led organization that advocates for the incorporation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color texts in schools all across the country in hopes of bringing around more informed conversations around race, racism, and anti-racism. And we're definitely really fortunate to have over 5,000 student organizers, over 145,000 social media followers, and over 800 school chapters since we've started. And we're definitely going to continue to make an impact.
Awesome. I guess it's my turn. Hi, everyone. My name is Riana. My elevator pitch is Riana like the singer, but I think she actually pronounces it Rihanna. But I am the founder of Boss Women Collective, which is a community focused on personal growth and professional development for women in the early stages of their career. And background on me, I started my career in social media marketing, and then after graduating BCA in 2017, pivoted into a tech role. Now I'm currently based in San Francisco working at Angelus Venture, which the mission is to encourage and increase the number of successful startups. So I'm working with investors who are looking to fund hopefully future unicorns. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. And you guys all have really inspiring stories. And I'm sure we'll hear more about kind of your own personal journeys as well as kind of the journey our world has been going through in the past couple of months. So to kind of kick it off, I wanted to talk a little bit about the intersection between social media and social justice and how you think specifically this year, but also kind of historically, how those two puzzle pieces sort of fit together, and places that they've succeeded and also places that we've seen failure between the two. If you want to kick it off, Sophia, that would be awesome. We can kind of just stick to that order if that's cool.
It's been something that's been really interesting for me to watch, like as a marketing professional, but also as someone who uses social media day to day, like the rest of us, especially in our generation. And I think from a marketing perspective, it's really changed how some clients have really wanted to talk to their audience and have kind of had them, take a step back and say, what is appropriate to be promoting right now, or what is more self-serving, or what can we do to kind of like work internally as a company to kind of rework how we feel about social justice and what our stance is, and how can we use social media as a tool for that, or just like a vehicle to kind of express that. But then also for personal use and just like among my peers, it's also been really interesting. I think in some ways it's really great because I've learned a lot, but I've also spoken out a lot. And I've also seen, some who have made mistakes on social media because it's so quick and it's right at our fingertips. And then there's the problem of trends, and everybody wants to amplify something and speak, and then it happens really quickly, and then we kind of learn and back up. And so watching it all happen really quickly has been really interesting. And a lot of times I've kind of sat back and learned, and then, or just kind of like worked with others behind the scenes, and then kind of went to myself and said, now how do, now that I've spoken for all my clients and helped them, how do I want to speak on behalf of my business and myself? And what does that look like? And there's just been a lot of different angles that I've had to consider and just constantly change and learn from.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there's a huge intersection between social media and social justice. I honestly can't think of a better way to disperse information to so many people than social media about a variety of issues. And I could definitely say that I've learned so much from social media, because you hear about a variety of sources that you're probably not going to hear on the news as often. And so I can definitely say a lot of people have taken part. It's as easy as reposting something on your story, or if you want to make an effort, you can. And so I definitely think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that has been stated. I know for Boston Collective, we, in June, we really took a step back and reanalyzed how we're using our social platforms to ensure that the content that we're pushing out and our mission is adding value to our followers. So I think for the big thing that we considered is, is this a moment or is this a movement? And how are we going to use our social channels and the reach that we have to continuously make an impact? And I know for me personally, it's been an interesting dynamic because I have Boston Collective as a community, but I also have my social media followers on my personal pages as like a micro influencer. And I know that there definitely was this like weird pressure for a lot of influencers to post something. So a lot of individuals started talking about things that they've never talked about and then never mentioned anything again since June. And I think there's somewhat of a fine line to walk where you're not just doing something because you feel like you have to talk about it, but you genuinely care. And whether you want to publicly showcase that journey or keep it to yourself, I think it is important no matter what, to read the posts that people are sharing. There's so much information, absorb the 15-second TikToks that are so helpful, and just find ways to use social media to access all of this amazing information that content creators are pushing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts on that question. I was excited for that one. And then the next one is a little bit of a twist from sort of the social justice conversation, which we will definitely be jumping back into. But, social media has this reputation of being toxic for self-confidence. And I mean, Instagram has changed their like algorithm and has made it so that, you don't see how many likes things get and how many followers. So I'm just sort of curious as to, your thoughts on how social media actually is affecting self-confidence and if it can also be used for good and boosting confidence. sort of what are your takes on that?
Yeah, it's I go back and forth with this every day, and I kind of have a love-hate relationship with social media because of this. And I think the love piece of it comes more from my work and the power that I see in terms of like the good it can have. But I also I love photography and I'm creative. And so I love that piece of it as well, especially on Instagram, because it is so much more visual based. But also as a woman and just as so many of us, it is really hard to cut through like the emotional piece and the comparison piece. And you're just kind of constantly up against everybody else. And there's a lot of times where I wish I could just take a break or just, not be as active, especially when it starts to feel more of like just showing up for performative purposes. But then there's this whole I think as marketers, we're kind of in this tricky situation where so much of marketing and conversation does happen on social media. So it's like, I can't really take a break, or I have to show up and I have to have those conversations or make announcements or, kind of use it and lead by example. So it's constantly a battle for me in terms of setting boundaries and, really paying attention of who I'm following and who I'm engaging with, and trying to like make it as much of a wholesome and collaborative platform as possible while still showing up enough to be present in my job and understand the trends and help my clients. It's hard. I think it's probably one of the hardest parts of my job, because not everyone can, a lot of people can shut their job off or shut the emotional part of their job off when they go home to use social media or go online or whatever. But in most of our situations, it's kind of constantly right at our fingertips.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sophia. I think boundaries is so important over social media. I can definitely say that I think social media at times can be toxic. My friends and I talk about this a lot since we are teens. And so we can definitely say that like sometimes seeing Instagram models all the time and comparing that to them, or just seeing people accomplish a lot of amazing feats, you can often like see that as being discouraging at times. You might doubt yourself and your abilities, but I think social media can be used for so much good, as we can see with social justice. And so you have to keep your overall purpose in mind. And I think one thing that's really important for me is making sure that your feed reflects what you love and that you have followers that support you. And so, yeah, setting boundaries is so important.
Another thing that has helped me has been doing like follow who I'm following, doing audits on them like every quarter, and or if I see something in my feed, and maybe it's more of like a it has to do with how I view myself, but if I see something that doesn't make me feel good about myself, I'll quickly unfollow the page. And I think doing that and cleansing your feed is really helpful. Obviously, it's harder to do that with your explore page with the algorithm, or other social platforms like TikTok, where your For You page is kind of all over the place nowadays. But another thing that has helped me is be more authentic with my followers and follow people who are authentic. So my favorite thing is seeing like bloggers with like 5 million followers actually show like behind the scenes of what a day in their life looks like, or maybe they're struggling with anxiety or the pressure from media. So I try to be as authentic and real as possible, and following other people like that has been helpful for just my overall mental health and feeling confident when I'm using these platforms.
Unmute. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I think that is definitely an important question, especially when we're so saturated in it at all times. So thank you for your input and advice. Honestly, I'll use it moving forward. And then my next question. So doom scrolling, that whole concept. So it's defined by Merriam-Webster as the tendency to continue to surf or scroll through bad news, even though the news is saddening, disheartening, and depressing. So sort of, why do we do that? And I'm curious as to, some of your thoughts as to why, and then also sort of what that effect has on us all as a society and how that can sort of be used as a tool for change?
I don't know why we do it. I feel like we all just do it, and the psychology behind it is really fascinating to me. And that's part of the reason that I really like marketing, because so much of it is driven by psychology and understanding people's behaviors and what they're attracted to. But I think, yeah, you're right. We get so sucked into this doom scrolling, even when it's nothing we even want to see. And I think it's kind of just like a societal habit that we all have, and social media has, I think even before social media was really at our fingertips, we were constantly talking about, if something on the news happened, it was, people talked about it at school for a while, and that was before we could even just take out our phones and look at it. And now I think social media kind of amplifies the accessibility of bad news, and we just get really absorbed into it. I think, like when I've found myself doing it, I guess the one thing that's come of it is that I have learned a lot, and then I've been able to like form my own take and opinions on it, and then take it elsewhere, whether it's kind of catching up with my friends in terms of like, did you see this? And then us having a conversation about it, or educating each other about it. But I think it's something that, and I know like TikTok's been doing that thing where you, if you're watching for too long, someone comes on and is like, stop scrolling. But we've also all found ourselves continue to scroll. It's hard. And I think it's hard because it's just at our fingertips. And again, it's that whole setting that boundary of, maybe I'll take Instagram off my phone, or maybe I won't have the news app, but then balancing like, okay, but how do I still stay informed? Or if you're in marketing, how do I keep an eye on my clients or do my job? So again, I've just had to kind of find tools, whether it's splitting up devices or keeping apps on the forefront of my phone versus others, so that I can kind of build my own, build my own habits in terms of how I'm using it and break other worse ones.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. To kind of give a personal experience in late May, like early June, with a lot of the things with Black Lives Matter and a lot of the lives being lost to police brutality, I found myself for hours like scrolling through my feed, and it was a lot. And so I realized like I was just spending too much time on this, and that my mental health was on a decline. And so for me, like exactly having boundaries, I decided to step away for social media for about a week or two. I had conversations with friends outside of that, and then we decided to come back together because we all decided to leave because it was too much for us. But I think it's so important to set boundaries, because I know a lot of the times we have pressure to always be there, always be reposting things, always be an activist. And sometimes you have to take yourself away because your mental health comes first. And so, yeah, I would definitely say the same thing.
I love that. I did the same thing for June. I deactivated my Instagram, and it was really hard because, like part of my side hustle is doing brand collaborations, but I definitely felt like for my mental health and use the time to have, not in real life, but virtual conversations with the BWC community during the month of June. And I think at the end of the month, once I reconfigured, like, what is my objective of these platforms? Like, not just the brand that I want to build and, that my intent of posting, but why am I spending 3 hours scrolling per day, and thinking about like what I can do with my time if I wasn't on social media. So I think that's been helpful. Also, just like using tech to like my advantage when it comes from the marketing side of like, how can I automate a lot of the tasks that I'm doing? How can I use tools to be better about like project managing campaigns and things like that? That's been really helpful. So I think kind of two sides, from like the marketing perspective of building a community versus the consumer consuming content and scrolling.
Yeah, thank you guys for sharing. I appreciate that. And I think that's something that even if you're not on that macro level of being an influencer or someone who really does a lot in social media, that's still an important practice to take in any part of your life. So I kind of wanted to ask a question about cyberbullying. I think we used to refer to it as cyberbullying. I don't know if that's so much of a buzzword anymore. That kind of came about in the heyday of like MySpace. And I remember growing up, that was a big thing in school. They were always telling you not to be a cyberbully. And when phones came about, people were kind of using them for negative purposes. And now we kind of know the term, or I don't know if everyone's familiar with the term, but like a keyboard warrior, and this notion of cancel culture has become really big. So I guess there's two sides to the question. One, how do we passionately stand by what we believe in without coming off as kind of like a keyboard warrior or kind of like a negative voice? But also, how do you as professionals in social media navigate the negative voices and this kind of like need to constantly be digging up dirt on companies or people in the industry to kind of take away their reputation or to kind of tarnish their image? I'm curious about your thoughts on that, because I feel like that's a thing that's kind of really become big in the past year. So
yeah, and I almost feel like in a way that can be more toxic than like the comparison side of social media or the performative side of social media. I mean, I think both, but this is kind of more of a constant. I think for myself, it's knowing like when to step away versus when it could be a conversation. And there's that hard balance of like social media is all about conversation and being social. So you don't want to be like dismissive or just like, not have the conversation right away, but you also don't want it to turn into this thing where, like you said, Maddy, like you're fighting with a keyboard warrior, and just kind of understanding like, are they willing to listen, or how far are you willing to go in terms of just like the emotional labor of, teaching, but also expressing and making sure you're heard. But from a marketing perspective, I found it to be even harder because, like I said, I work with clients kind of from all different places and walks of life and different perspectives. And ultimately, it's up to the client in terms of how they, on behalf of their company, want to engage with these people. And my job is to help them do that and advise and actually execute that. But I've had situations where sometimes, a client really wants to go for it and have the conversation, and sometimes maybe becomes a keyboard warrior themselves, or others who say, I don't even want to engage, when maybe it was a good opportunity to engage and kind of, use that opportunity to speak on behalf of their company and their company's values. So I find it to be just like such a situation by situation sort of thing. And it's really tricky.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can say diversify our narrative. Like, one of the things with having a big platform is you do get a lot of hate comments. So that's not really fun. But the thing is, I can definitely say like I've gotten hate comments on posts that I've made, diversify our narrative as a whole. But I think one thing to realize is sometimes these keyboard warriors are not coming from a very well-meaning place. And so you have to think about that, because sometimes you can take it personal. But I personally can say I'm lucky enough to I do have a lot of confidence in what I put out there. So I don't really pay much attention to hate comments. So I think for anybody who may be struggling with that, one thing to keep in mind is the overall purpose of your movement and understanding that your words have a really big impact, and that's why you're putting out content out there. And then I would say another thing is be very confident in what you put out, because if you're not entirely confident of what you put out and you already have that guilt in your mind, and then you see a ton of hate comments, then you start doubting yourself even more. And so be confident in what you put out.
Yeah, I love that point. I think on the piece around being confident about what you put out, there definitely have been some posts where I've been hesitant to put live on our feed, and then they go live and the feedback wasn't great. So I think with Boston Collective, we're better about getting feedback from our entire team, because I could see a post and see nothing wrong with it, but someone else can see that our intention might have been positive, but the impact that it has on people from different lived experiences than myself could be negative. So that's one thing that we do. And then another is I try to actively engage with people who maybe are questioning our post and come from a very calm and collective place of really tapping into like those customer service skills. But sometimes I really just want to go off, like, what are you talking about? So it's good, definitely that fine balance of educating our community and making it a comfortable and safe space to foster discussion, because we don't want people necessarily to not question our posts, but we want to do it in a respectful way that encourages a diversity of thought and perspectives. So we love when someone challenges us, especially if it makes us stronger as a community. It's just ensuring at the core that everyone's doing so in a respectful way.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's definitely, I mean, what you're all touching on, that just unknowing, but I really like, Bethlehem, your point about being really confident in what you're putting out. And then, that sort of allows some of that to drip off of you and not hurt your heart, which is good. And then the next question that I have is, so, social media clearly has become a space for political debate and often continuous conversation. So I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about this notion and how your companies or organizations, for two of you, navigate this. So sort of how you handle these conversations and what approach you take.
For myself and my company, because I'm kind of the face of it, but the other women that are with me, we're small and share the same values. We, again, try to just kind of have a place where we can foster conversation about it. And it's interesting because like I said, I have clients from all different perspectives, and I sometimes feel hesitant of what to post and what that will start, because I kind of have to, I want to post things that are true to my value, but it's also a marketing platform for me. But I kind of came to the conclusion that, I don't want to not post it. If they don't agree with it, or if it's going to create that big of a rift, then I don't necessarily want to work with them anyways. So from my perspective, on my personal marketing, I just kind of put out there anything that I want and that speaks to me and that I'm willing to have a conversation about or willing to educate others about. But again, kind of like with the, keyboard warrior and politics, speaking and marketing on behalf of other companies is oftentimes a challenge, because oftentimes these companies maybe don't share the same values that I do. And I kind of have to remove myself a little bit and say, okay, this is, I'm putting on the hat where I'm on behalf of the company and I'm speaking on behalf of them. And it's still my role to advise and work with them. But at the end of the day, it's their voice and not theirs. And sometimes I kind of have to check my morals, or I'll put, certain things out where I'm kind of like, that is a conversation I would have never, or, a post that I would have never wanted to have, or sometimes it feels really performative, but again, it's what, the client wants. And it's just this boundary of, this balance, of my own advice, but not pushing propaganda, but at the same time, putting something that they want out there. And I think politics is kind of like the hardest. I think that stands true for, everything on social media these days, whether it's just expressive content or social justice content, but political content is where I've found that to be kind of like the sweet spot of conflict. And then it's oftentimes just kind of backing up, and before putting out on social media, having a conversation with the client about like, what is your goal with putting this out? And, if you don't feel confident about it, or if you feel like it's going to stir up controversy, how do we want to handle it? And really kind of peeling back the layers and talking about it before it's out there, so that everyone kind of understands what to expect and what it means to put something like that out there or have that conversation.
Yeah, so since Diversify Our Narrative is trying to become a nonprofit, we're actually not allowed to endorse specific candidates. So what we did instead is we'll debrief like the presidential debates. We'll talk about certain measures that are like educational related. For example, Measure QQ, which is in California and basically says that 16 and 17-year-olds would be allowed to vote on their school board. And basically in general, we encourage people And so if there's one thing you can get from this talk, please vote.
Yeah, I think Boston Collective, we've had a lot of internal conversations about how we wanted to approach this past year and the upcoming election. And kind of where we landed upon is that we haven't like made any specific statements about a certain candidate or against another candidate. But what we have focused on are like our values and our mission and how certain policies or the values of certain individuals impact how women are perceived in the workplace or in our personal lives. So we're kind of taking that approach where we're kind of hinting at things, but we're not directly calling it out. And I think kind of similar to what Sophia mentioned about the partners that we work with, we of course want to make sure that they align with our values. So kind of stepping back from like the political party per se, and just ensuring that, you know, we're all about empowerment and support and inspiration. So we want to make sure our partners follow that same guideline as well.
Awesome. Yes, definitely vote. That is the main takeaway from this panel. Kind of along the same lines, and maybe a bit of a, you know, heartier discussion that we can get into is I want to talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think this year has been partially because of COVID-19 and how we've all moved into this digital space where much of our conversation is happening on Zoom and on Instagram and in the DMs and whatever. There has been, not only after George Floyd's death, a resurgence of this Black Lives Matter movement, but it's also moved, I would say, for the most part digitally. And there's been a lot of conversation happening on a digital platform. And specifically, Blackout Tuesday, which happened, I believe, back in May or early June. And that was a big conversation and a big topic for debate because there was this conversation about all these well-meaning people posting a black square on their Instagram, but then the intention behind it or the actual impact behind it was a bit murky. And so I'm just curious about your guys' thoughts on that as both professionals in the industry, but also as, you know, users of social media, and kind of this notion of like remaining apolitical to the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think that, in my opinion, it's not a political matter, but it's just a human matter. And so how you guys are seeing this through your professional platforms, but also on your personal platforms still being navigated, because I think there is a, and this is unfortunate, but there's kind of been a drop off in conversation as things, you know, as media conversations happen, people are more conversational about it on social media, but then as things start to turn maybe more to the debates or more to other matters going on in the world, there's less of a conversation. So how do we keep that conversation going, and how has it affected you both personally and professionally? That's a big question.
But it's a good one, and it's a really important one. I mean, as we all know, after George Floyd's death, social media just erupted. And I think part of that was really good because people were talking about it and people were educated about it, but it also kind of became like this breeding ground for just performative posting. And it was really hard to kind of cut through that. And then I know some people felt like, you know, I don't really know what to say on social media, but I have this pressure of, if it doesn't show up in my feed, do people have this notion that I'm not doing anything behind the scenes, when really like anything that happens on social media when it becomes to like political or social justice activism needs to be backed up by concrete actions. So I think from a professional point of view, you know, like I was personally compelled to say something, but definitely like I wasn't posting every single day. And I was doing a lot more kind of behind the scenes, whether it was donating or reading or, but then you're kind of always worried about, you know, like, you know, people are watching. And I feel like a lot of the keyboard warriors came out and were, you know, kind of questioning like, hey, I haven't seen you post, like, do you even care? When really there's, you know, again, it's like, just because I'm not posting on social media every day doesn't mean I don't care. And there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes. And so it was a really tough thing to navigate personally, but also because I use my personal platform as a means of marketing for my business as well. So there's like that weird overlap, and it was really murky there. For business, I found it even more challenging because kind of like I was saying with the previous question, I could feel all of my clients feeling really nervous and being like, okay, like every other company is posting something, now we have to post something. And, when there's other urgent things that come up, it's as easy as like, hey, can you throw something up for this? But there's no, social realm involved. So it's easy to do that. Where with this, I had clients who were like, hey, can you throw up a black square? Or, hey, can you make a statement for Black Lives Matter and put it up? And that was really hard because then again, it kind of was me tapping into my values and saying, I think you need to write the statement and I'll help you, but this needs to come from you as a company. And I had a wide range of clients who are like really excited to work with me on a statement after they had a really internal conversation amongst their company in terms of like prolonged action after the post was gone out. And that was kind of the best case scenario. Whereas others were, some I didn't hear from, some were kind of like, I don't really want anything to do with it, but something needs to be put up. Can you and your team just write the statement for me? And that was really uncomfortable for the team and I. Part of it was a good discomfort. Another part of it was like, this doesn't really align with what we should be doing, and it should really come from the company themselves. So, and then again, like you said, Maddy, it's just kind of dropped off. And part of me feels like it's my place to check in with clients to say, hey, do we want to readdress this? Do we want to do an update on what we're doing internally? But then another part is like, again, that's me pushing propaganda, and some clients just aren't really there. And so it's a really fine balance between the kind of my values and my morals, but also professionalism, and I work for them in a sense. And it's also had me take a really hard look at who I'm working for and who I want to be working for.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sophia. And just to add, I guess in my personal opinion, I didn't really find Blackout Tuesday to be very helpful. I think that I understand it was meant to amplify Black voices, but it did end up actually hurting like the Black Lives Matter movement, because people were using the Black Lives Matter hashtag and the BLM hashtag, and that ended up hiding a lot of posts about actual like police violence, about bail funds and stuff that people needed to actually see. And I would definitely agree with the performative activism. I know a lot of people did post like black screens, and they would post either like the one hashtag or the same like one sentence caption, and then the next day they would go back to posting about food or just like about anything and just not talk about the movement again. And so I could definitely say that was an issue, but yeah, I think Sophia said it really well.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been stated. I think that kind of like very accurately depicts what happened early June with Blackout Tuesday. I've tried to be more cognizant of not passing judgment on people, and instead kind of use that time to make sure that I'm doing everything in my power as an individual and with BWC to ensure that we're not just talking about all of these things that sound great on social, but behind the scenes that we're actually taking actions to make changes. And I think that that's the most important thing you can do. Like, you can unfollow people and you can change things in your day-to-day life, but to a certain extent, judging people, turning into a keyboard warrior is not going to really serve you or your mental health too much.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys answering those questions. And I know that, it can feel uncomfortable to talk about these things, but that's the point of conversations like this, is to get ourselves out of our comfort zone and really address these matters and from all different perspectives. So I really appreciate that. This is kind of a combination of a question that I had thought of, but also a question that we fielded from the audience. So talking a little bit about being women or women identifying individuals and being leaders in your industry. I think you guys are three really incredible examples of female leaders in business and in tech and in marketing. So I'm proud to be able to, do this with you guys. And I'm curious, how has your personal relationship with social media, we kind of talked about this before, but what hurdles have you faced in your career, and what assumptions have people made about you that have really you know, made your time as a social media strategist or as a marketer or as a businesswoman difficult? And how do you navigate, because I think there's a conversation, and there has been for the past couple of years, surrounding like being a girl boss, which is like awesome. And but there's also a lot of pressure to like be the ideal girl boss and like be, I'm sure Riana, you can speak about this from Boss Women Collective, like there's this notion of imposter syndrome too, and like, am I doing enough? Am I enough of a girl boss? So I'm just curious about how your, you know, own identity as a woman and how your job kind of integrate with each other, and how that's been in the development of your career.
Yeah, it's really hard. And imposter syndrome is the most real thing ever. And I think I experience it a lot in my job, both with clients, but then also personally marketing myself. And it's hard because I always like, you know, I'll talk to friends and we'll talk about different jobs and, you know, their role as a woman in their job. And the interesting thing about social media is that it's kind of just like, it's so accessible to everyone that you kind of always have to like be there or be on top of it, or, you know, in a way be performing and be marketing yourself, but balancing, you know, I feel like an imposter right now, or like this performative, or, you know, and then there's just like the comparing factor where I feel like, and because it's visual, it just like, you know, do I use a picture of myself, or there's just like so many things that I think we overthink, or at least I overthink as women when it comes to not only marketing myself and my team of women, but I also notice it a lot in terms of a lot of the business owners that I work for and do marketing for, they're women as well. So a lot of kind of what we talk about is how to amplify that, but it's kind of scary because the more you put yourself out, the more prone you are to feedback and judgment, but it's also judgment that oftentimes can foster a conversation and, you know, educate others as well. I think there's a lot of pressure. I also find that I just don't have as many friends or peers in the field, or it's like a conversation that I have with a lot of peers and colleagues in the field, but most of them identify as males. So it's just, you know, they hear me and everything, but it's just a completely different conversation. And I think they think about it a lot differently than we do. It's hard. And it's hard to kind of, again, put that boundary between, you know, showcasing my own life as a woman on social media, but also as a business owner who's a woman as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Diversify Our Narrative's entire executive team is women. And so I definitely can say that we have a lot of conversations about supporting each other throughout this journey, because we didn't expect to grow this much this quickly. So it's definitely been like an amazing journey. And I can definitely say that imposter syndrome is definitely a big for me, because I thought that this would be a smaller movement and that I wouldn't basically have as big of a platform as I do now. And so I think that's definitely something to keep in mind every time that I post. If I'm doing like an Instagram takeover, I need to make sure I always like double check what I put out. But I think one thing in general is just to understand that you have to continually educate yourself and be open-minded, because like we said earlier, sometimes people won't agree with what you're putting out, or sometimes you just won't know something in general and somebody's going to educate you on it. So you have to be willing to take feedback, and you have to be willing to grow as a person. And so how I do this is by continually reading more books about BIPOC communities, just doing whatever I can to continually educate myself so that I don't have to worry about not knowing as much.
Yeah, this is something that's, of course, very like obvious and top of mind for BWC, because it's literally like the fall or the creation of Girl Boss and everything with Sophia Maruso and the larger Girl Boss network. But for BWC, we're trying to be more mindful of this notion of toxic positivity that a lot of like Girl Boss memes or pages push out, where, you know, you're like hustle 24/7, or like you can accomplish anything, like keep going at it, keep killing it. So we're trying to be more mindful that, you know, there are negative implications of that type of content. And then on the piece around being a like feeling like an imposter. I actually tweeted out last week, like, do men experience imposter syndrome? Because I never see any manels talk about like, hey Bob, you're 40 and white and male and hetero, like, do you ever feel like an imposter? And so many men responded like literally every day. And I think oftentimes the question about feeling like imposter is very much geared towards women, but it's more so just an individual thing. Like at every point, most of us probably feel like an imposter. Most people don't know what they're doing. They're kind of just going about their day to day, hoping that they can push the pieces together. And I noticed that my confidence level, like 3x once I realized that the people that I'm intimidated by probably don't know what they're doing either. So I stopped looking at people's titles when I'm stalking them on LinkedIn and getting intimidated that this person's a VP at Netflix. And I just started seeing them as people. And I think that's what's truly made me feel like a girl boss, where I'm not comparing myself to them, but I'm more so inspired that I could get to that level one day. So I think that's been like the most impactful mindset shift that I've had on my journey of being or becoming a girl boss.
I love that. I think that's awesome. And I think that I will personally take a lot of that with me, because to be candid, I was like interviewing these 3 super influential, powerful women, and I felt a little intimidated, but I think that we are all girl bosses in our own right. So that's awesome. This is kind of a question to wrap things up, but I'm curious about, with the dawn of COVID and all that it's changed for us, which is a lot, how do you guys see the future of marketing changing? Do you think that everything has moved pretty much to a digital space right now? And how do you think that's going to evolve? Do you think that there's going to be certain innovations? I'm sure there are, and I'm sure that there are many powerful people working on those right now. But how do you think your company is going to change? Obviously, Zoom meetings and remote work is probably going to stay the same. But from there, I'm curious about different ways you guys kind of predict the future of marketing and social media changing in the next couple of years.
Interestingly enough, I saw it kind of change from the very beginning. I think like in March, when the panic was setting in and everybody was kind of just really uncomfortable and not really sure what was going to happen, I, like everybody else, was questioning my own business and the people that work for me and just different things like that, and still have those days a lot. But I think that people have really realized that if they haven't been online in one capacity or another prior to this, now is when they really need to be online. And kind of their only voice is marketing online right now, or, whether it's personal marketing or, bigger marketing. And so I've kind of seen a huge shift of companies just being like, oh, I need digital marketing, or I need to be in the digital space, or I need to update this or that for my company now more than ever. And so it's kind of, I've been the busiest I've ever been, which is, it's good, but it's also weird because it's just unexpected. And sometimes that's when the imposter syndrome kicks in, where it's like, how am I one of the busiest people right now? But it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how different tools come out. A lot of tools have already, started to come out, or, Zoom is being used more, just different like project management. And, we all saw TikTok explode simply because we were all home and using it. And a lot of people were unemployed, and people of all ages were all over TikTok. And so that's kind of changed the way social media platforms have been used through this all. So it's definitely something that I've kind of been, I think a lot of it is unknown, which is scary, but also I think we're in the right place in terms of digital technology, because now more than ever it's had to be used, whether it's just for functioning as a team or, marketing and communication.
Yeah, I would definitely say the same thing. So since Diversify Our Narrative started in June, we didn't have an opportunity to not be online. So that's really all that we know. And we're probably going to continue doing that, because we have seen so much growth over Instagram, especially, and the way that retweeting, reposting can really boost your following. And so we'll definitely stick with that. And we also, just in general, think that things being virtual is actually helpful for our student organizers because of accessibility. some students don't have the ability to go to school board meetings in person and have somebody to drive them. Some people don't have the ability to go and pay money to go to a certain event. And so having it accessible over Zoom is really, really helpful for a lot of people. So I would definitely say that digital marketing is definitely the future of marketing. And I think in terms of Instagram too, I don't know if you guys have noticed that feature, but sometimes for some posters, for certain like clothing items or like necklaces, you can press on the post and it'll take you to a direct link. So I've seen a lot of friends that have grown their platforms so much for small businesses. So I definitely think that a lot of people are going to stick to digital marketing.
Yeah, for BWC, when March hit, it completely shifted our mission because we were actually started specifically for in real life events. Only in New York, LA, and SF, we were doing about 2 to 3 events per month per city. So once March hit, we were like, what do we do? But I think it really encouraged us to like take a step back, think about the accessibility of our content. And once we really honed down on our professional tips and advice and really becoming an expert in that, because so many people were, you know, worried about job security and stability, it really allowed us to like increase our following at a very exciting rate. So now we're working backwards on like how we can create that same sense of community where you go to like a panel or meet someone in person in a Zoom event or with our social following. So we're testing a lot of different things, but it was scary at first, and just seeing like the engagement in our social community slowly growing, it's been like exciting that we're heading in the right direction there.
Totally. Yeah, I think that that's great. And I am excited to see what happens, especially, you know, as someone who's also in this digital space. It's exciting, and I love Zoom. Look at this. It's great. So we just have a few minutes left. So the last question is sort of a silly, just sort of fun one. Can be from a totally personal experience. I'm just sort of curious, you know, what is your favorite social platform and a little bit about why? And then if you have any final parting words that you'd like to share, like mine is going to be, please vote. I will put some resources here in the chat. But yeah, I think that I'd just love to hear a little bit about your favorite platforms and why.
Yeah, and I also want to add to that, if you guys have any, there's no harm in a little shameless brag. So if you guys have any accounts that you want people to follow, or just accounts that you as a consumer love, please share those, because I know I'm always looking for great educational resources, but also those like feel good resources on social. So please.
Maddie, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'll have to, maybe there's a spot once I stop talking, but I can type them, because there's so many great accounts to follow. I have, my company does a newsletter every month, and we always finish the newsletter with accounts we're following. And they're not necessarily accounts that have anything to do with the marketing world, but just really, you know, again, just like feel good accounts, other really inspirational people or just brands that are worth filling your feed with to kind of cut through everything else. I think Instagram is my favorite. I did photography for a really long time and still kind of dabble in it, and I'm able to kind of do it a lot through my work. So for me, Instagram, I really like it because it's, you know, you can put a voice to it, but it's so visual, which is kind of my favorite piece. And I find that even though there's kind of drama and toxic culture everywhere, I see a little bit less of it on Instagram, because you can really kind of curate who you follow and who you're engaging with. I honestly don't look over at the Explore tab very often. I find that to be more of a toxic area, but I don't find myself really going over there. Sometimes I find myself on the shopping tab, but I think that's a fun new feature. And again, it's all curated towards you. Again, I think every social media platform has, you know, I love LinkedIn for work, but in terms of just personal use, I think Instagram is my favorite for the visual aspect.
Yeah, I would have to say the same. I think Instagram is my favorite. And to explain why. I think of it as a really great combination of Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, and TikTok. So all in one. And to kind of explain that a little more, you can probably see a lot of Twitter posts being screenshotted and put onto Instagram, some funny posts, some educational posts. In terms of like Facebook, you see like posts about people and their looks, families, events, and then TikTok with the new Reels update. And then, yeah, Snapchat with the filters on Instagram stories. I think it's a really great combo of all of them.
Just to provide a different perspective that's not Instagram, I've been using Twitter a lot the last year, and I specifically use it to connect with people from different professional backgrounds. So I love seeing how they very quickly share their perspective or opinion on a subject. And I also love it because whenever I tweet something and someone responds something like mean or just annoying, I just respond with like funny gifs. So I love being able to push out a different type of content on that platform that's not as like long formatted.
Well, thank you guys for sharing. Please feel free to drop any accounts that anyone likes to follow. That's for attendees too, in the conversation, and then we will also share those with everyone. One final question before we wrap up. We have like 5 seconds, but we can wrap it up in like 30. What is like your one best piece of advice for any women looking to start their own company or to dive into a field that they may not feel totally comfortable in? Like, what's your one, you know, as you kind of said, Riana, like your elevator pitch to women who want to be girl bosses like you guys?
I think just do it. I feel like that's the worst advice possible, but I also feel like it's the best advice possible. When I decided to do it, I didn't overthink it, which is really rare of me because I overthink everything and then I wait forever and I wait for the right moment and I wait till I have all my ducks in a row. And I was just so excited by the idea once I got the idea in my head that I went home and built a website that night. And then, you know, later was like, oh, there's actually real things that have to go into this, and kind of just went from there. But I have a lot of friends who have been in the same boat where they've been thinking about it for years and, you know, waiting for everything to be put together. And I found I'm just I learn by doing. And there's a lot of things I didn't know when I went into it, but I feel like the best way to learn how to do it is just by doing and finding those clients or services in the beginning that are just kind of patient with you and just having the confidence to override the imposter syndrome that is more real than ever, especially when you first start. And then just keep learning and doing and learning and doing.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Don't let your hesitation and imposter syndrome stop you. Your words can truly make an impact.
I would say don't be afraid to pivot from what you originally thought it was going to be as you collect learnings and see what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you all so much. This was great. All of you brought such great insight and wisdom. I'm stealing what Kelly said in the chat, but it's true. I think that this was awesome and it's a really important conversation, and I hope that we can continue it. And I'm going to send a follow-up email to everyone who was registered for this event, and I'll include the resources that y'all shared in the chat, as well as links to your socials so we can, you know, stay in touch with you all and keep it going. So yeah, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And we hope to, you know, have you attend some of these in the future. And we are excited to spread the word about the work that you're all doing.
Thanks, Sadie. Thanks, Maddie.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Have a good one. Enjoy your rest of your week. Bye.